By now, you've read Houston Smith's chapter on Buddhism and viewed all other online materials regarding this religion on the website. In the last episode, we explored the Hindu concept of Atman, the self, which is eternal and nothing less than the ultimate divine reality known as Brahman. Remember that this true self is not to be identified with my persona or material body, which are subject to pain, suffering, ignorance, change, and ultimately death. Atman is immune from these rather unfortunate features of human existence. But what does Buddhism have to say about this idea? Actually, quite a bit. Students are often surprised to find that Buddhism rejects the notion of Atman. If Atman means self, we will render Anatman as non-self. We'll say more on this in a bit. A lot of people find this to be, quite frankly, depressing. Buddhism is sometimes taken to be a rather pessimistic sort of spirituality. So you have the first noble truth, which tells us that life is painful and dissatisfying, and now we have what seems to be a rejection of a substance like a soul that might survive death, for instance. But here I want to look at the denial of Atman within the context of the three marks of existence, the Buddhist teaching that all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, marked by painfulness, and are non-self. Like the Four Noble Truths, the three marks of existence should be thought of as an important part of Buddhist practice, and not simply a set of dogmas or philosophical ideas. Let's take impermanence first. Buddhism appeals to something that we seem willing to acknowledge about life, even if we aren't always consciously aware of it, that things are in a constant state of flux. Everything is changing all the time. The cells that make up our bodies die out and are replaced every certain number of years. Our concepts evolve over time with experience and education, ideally, of course. Human relationships experience a variety of different phases. Our emotions and desires are transformed numerous times throughout a single day. Health and mental alertness have a well-known tendency to decline over the span of one's life. Now, much of this sort of change comes with painfulness and discontentment. We find ourselves often being resistant to life's flux. Take aging, for example. Our society seems obsessed with youth, with looking and being young, trying to slow down the aging process through cosmetics or surgery or even genetic enhancement. Many of us seem to be holding on to an unrealistic and unhealthy picture of youth, acting and believing as if true fulfillment lies in our lives mirroring that sort of image. We find ourselves clinging to these sorts of pictures. This is not to say that all change is immediately or entirely painful. Some change is wholesome and beneficial, but it's impossible to ignore that the goods in life are themselves subject to change and, yes, decay. When pleasant things pass, our clinging to those things, our resistance to change, compounds our pain. To be clear, all things are subject to impermanence, not just sentient creatures. For instance, I live in Oklahoma City, a town that has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. If my great-grandfather were here today, he wouldn't even recognize the city that he lived in. Think of how the planet has undergone major changes in the last 4+ billion years of its existence. Now this brings us to dukkha, that sentient life is marked by painfulness. Pain here refers not just to physical pains, but to mental distresses as well. There is painfulness that comes with unpleasantness, dissatisfaction, frustration, stress, change, that which we would like to be otherwise, not getting what we want, not being able to rid ourselves of certain people or situations. Now we can look at Anatman, the doctrine of non-self, where Hindus had claimed that our personalities are nothing but a mask hiding our true, changeless and eternal natures. The Buddha saw no need to posit anything beyond this mask. The concept of self applies to no thing. First, the concept of self does not apply to my empirical self, the lowercase s self, the self that is me as a conditioned being. I exist as a person, but my physical being, or persona, are not self. Second, the concept of non-self does not apply to some metaphysical entity that is immune from ignorance, suffering, change, and death. So because my existence is subject to impermanence and suffering, I cannot be said to exist as some purely blissful, immutable substance. But if there is no self, then who or what am I? A person, of course. The term person is a convenient way for referring to an ever-changing flow of physical and mental phenomena that we will refer to here as the 5 aggregates. Of course, these are mentioned in the readings. They are the 5 processes that make up a person. They include such features as, but not limited to, your physical body, your volitional faculties, your will to act, mental powers that form concepts and label the objects of our experiences, either properly or improperly, the quality of our experiences, such as pleasant, painful, neutral. Again, think of these qualities as processes. They are in a constant state of change, of arising or diminishing, and therefore lacks a self. Also, each of these 5 aggregates is subject to painfulness. We are actually told that the 5 aggregates burn with the fires of dukkha through practice. These aggregates are to be developed in such a way that they are refined and integrated with one another. A person is no more a self identical to any one of these 5 processes than a car is identical to its engine, radio, wheels, etc. And the term car refers to a collection of just these sorts of features. In the same way, person refers to a combination of the 5 aggregates, which themselves are always changing and subject to pain. The non-self teaching is ultimately meant to help people overcome their grasping. To think that there is something that I truly am, or that there are things that are mine, is a source of grasping and attachment, which are the roots of dukkha. Now, it would be a shame if we overlooked a positive aspect of this doctrine. Consider the following argument. All things are either self or non-self, but nothing is self, so it follows that all things are non-self. Premise 1 is a statement of a sort of dualism. All things are either me or not me. Premise 2 is the doctrine of enlightenment. The conclusion tells us that there is no such thing as self anywhere to be found. On one hand, we lose the concept of an eternal and unchanging and maybe deathless I. However, we may stand to gain a sense of unity with the world around us. For nothing is self. All things are actually processes of ever-changing realities. I am a stream of fluctuating phenomena, but so is everything else. Gaining this insight could help us lose a sense of separation from everything else, and it could decrease our suffering.